So to Whanau Ora, a sum of money has been allocated, and for all who trembled with outrage that the policy was for Māori only, it's been made clear it's for families in need. So what about the money? Is it enough to support the outcomes that are promised? Joining me now in studio is CEO of the Whanau Ora Marae Trust, John Tamihere, and from Wellington, human rights activist John Minto. Thank you both for joining me.
Kia.
John Tamihere, the first question, 134 million, a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, it is. If you want to be churlish about it, there's never enough money in social, health, welfare, education. They're big black holes just suck up a lot. So, but what is tremendous about the policy is that it's been accepted. You know, I went to politics to try and get this policy through, and so you've got to commend the Māori Party for
so this is
getting
your
the policy through. Well, no, not just mine. For 20 years, 25 years, up and down the country, if you talk to all Māori that have been involved in health, welfare, education, justice programming, they've always desired to have a wraparound type of a service where we have one relationship person that builds a relationship with integrity with families, rather than a schizophrenic deal across 10 different agencies pouring over one family and a bunch of individuals within it going nowhere.
John Minto, why don't you like Whanau Ora?
Well, I think it's got an enormous job to do, and what really worries me is that the resources that are put into it will be able to help some individual families, and they'll be able to provide some real benefits there. But as soon as we have another economic downturn, all of that work will be lost because we haven't got the fundamentals right. And what really worries me is we have the cream of Māori political leadership within the Māori Party focusing very much on the bottom of the cliff, where these families have been are victims of deliberate economic policies. And so it seems to me that instead of focusing there, and I mean it's important to pick up those families, it really is, but it's even more important to focus on the top of the cliff and on policies that will, for example, provide full employment so that every family can stand on its own 2 feet, because I think that is the fundamental problem we have.
John Tamihere, bottom of the cliff stuff?
No, well, what do? You can draw a line. Okay, you can be brutal and crude and draw a line and just say, well, the prison population, over 50% represented by Māori, abuse cases 60% by, we can draw a line and say, to hell with all those families, and they're not part of my commitments and my obligations and my duties, and I'll migrate to the top end of town. That's not what it's about. And so we are duty bound. We as a community are only as good as our most impoverished and our most deprived. And if we continue to keep a focus on solely high achievement and get bound into a philosophical and ideological debate, we philosophize while people go to rack and ruin. And so it's not an either or issue. You've got to concentrate on the big picture. In terms of the reclamation of economic capacity amongst Māori, the jury's still out on that, because we have iwi leadership still struggling with how they can connect those huge balance sheets with where our communities and where our deprived communities are. And so John Minto rightly identifies a problem, but it's not insurmountable, and we've only come to this thing in his generation and my generation of recompense, compensation and coming together in this discussion. So I don't think we're going to get there overnight, but Whanau Ora is definitely a step in the right direction. Look, we're sick and tired of others standing over us, running all the programs, and then looking down their noses at us as their program fails us. So if we fail in Whanau Ora, well, we'll see who fails, rather than this pushing our people all around and managing their problems rather than putting a fix in.
John Minto, what's so wrong with Māori taking the initiative and looking after themselves?
I think that's great. I think it's wonderful.
So you support that then?
I don't have any. Well, I think it is part of overall tino rangatiratanga, and I think that's a positive thing. But what I'm desperately concerned about is that there's all of this focus going, and John quite rightly says, you know, we've got 50% of the prison population are Māori, and you've got the Māori disproportionately represented at the and all those negative social statistics.
And on that, do you
so
accept that Whanau Ora can help address those issues that you're talking about?
Yes, it can help address those issues, but it will only be short-term addressing of those problems. As soon as we have an economic downturn, and we have them regularly now, we find that those families, all that money that's being spent now will just disappear, because these families are alienated from the economic mainstream, and that is the real problem. What I want to see is the government take responsibility for having a policy of full employment, and we don't have anybody on the dole. You abolish the dole, because every single person has a job. The private sector can't provide those jobs, so the public sector needs to do that. It did happen in previous generations, and I think that should be the focus now. And if we did that, we would give Māori families, the breadwinners in those families, Māori families, the resources to stand on their own feet, because I have huge faith in families, Māori, Pacific, Pākehā families, all of the families in West Auckland, for example, to be able to stand on their own feet if they have a decent income.
John Tamihere, let's briefly look at the detail of this policy, because there are still some struggling with the whole concept. For example, what is the definition of a navigator?
Look, I can't talk for other groups' evolution of Whanau Ora, but in Whanau Waipareta, our policy is called Whanau Tahi. Our operationalisation of that policy is called Mataora. And so we've gone down a track. Now, Whanau Navigator in a Waipareta setting will be a person that has a beefed up number of skills. So they're not just a mental health worker under a silo contract over here. They're not a community health worker over here. They're not a tikanga worker over here. No, they've got to be. We've got to break the silos and put a horizontal match across. And so I'm quite happy about a new engineering of a new type of workforce.
It's almost like a one-stop shop social worker.
Yeah, it is, but the skill sets that they've got allow them to firstly get a relationship based on integrity, not regulation. We're not regulators, we're not part of the criminal justice system, we're not part of the welfare system or the education system. We must be rated on moving these families into some form of independence, rather than a codependent relationship on 8 or 9 different government agencies.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. John Tamihere, John Minto, thank you both for joining me.